No one looked twice when the grey-haired man with deep-set eyes climbed into the driver's seat of the old military transport bus at 0530. His uniform plain, name tag faded, silence tighter than the grip on his steering wheel. Just another contractor shuttling new SEAL recruits from barracks to hell. A quiet nobody while the bus rattled through pre-dawn fog, full of loud, cocky voices, testosterone and adrenaline bubbling from men who hadn't yet seen real war, joking, flexing, sizing each other up like wolves in uniform, not knowing the predator was already in the cage with them, sitting 5 feet away with haunted eyes that had seen too much and said nothing. Not even when one recruit started mocking the driver. But this old guy never fired a weapon, getting chuckles from the others. And the driver didn't flinch, didn't react. Just drove on, gaze fixed, mouth tight, as if gripping words he'd vowed never to speak again. Because legends don't boast, they endure, and demons don't sleep, they drive. And as the sun rose and the gates of Coronado Base opened, everything might have stayed ordinary if one recruit hadn't stood up while the others filed out, shirtless after stripping for PT. When his eyes locked on something inked faintly through the driver's rolled sleeve tattoo. Old, faded, not flashy, just coordinates and a date. But it was enough to freeze him mid-step. Breath caught, voice shaking as he asked, "Sir, where did you get that ink?" And suddenly the laughter stopped. Heads turned. The atmosphere shifted like a pressure drop before a storm. Because the recruit recognized those numbers, those coordinates from Molly. April 2004, Operation Devil's Gate. A classified mission whispered about in SEAL legend. A mission that never officially happened. Where an entire squad went dark and only one man made it back dragging 3 wounded Marines. And the torn body of his commander, shot twice in the chest, with shrapnel in his leg and a broken radio he rebuilt mid-firefight, using wires from his own earpiece, calling in evac while bleeding out under a collapsed schoolhouse wall. And that man, according to rumor, disappeared after debrief, refused all medals, retired without ceremony, name redacted from all reports, until now, until this moment, when the recruit's voice broke through the silence like a blade. Your ghost? And the driver's jaw clenched, but he gave no answer. Just turned off the ignition and said, "Time to get moving, son." And yet the names spread like wildfire down the base within hours. Recruits whispering, instructors stunned, old officers pulling up decommissioned files, because Ghost was a myth, a campfire story to scare rookies into taking training seriously. But now he was real. And he'd been driving their bus, unrecognized, unthanked, while they bragged about 5-mile runs and push-up counts. And when Commander Reese himself, a war hero, stormed the motor pool to verify it, the look in his eyes when he saw the tattoo said everything. Because he'd served with Ghost once, briefly, had heard the radio call when Ghost refused exfil until every man was accounted for, even dead ones, and Reese saluted without hesitation. The kind of salute given between equals, warriors who bled for others without ever asking for applause. And still the old man resisted the attention, brushing it off, saying he just wanted to do his job. But the truth was a storm had been brewing in him for years. Guilt for the ones he couldn't save. Nightmares he'd driven away mile by mile. And it wasn't until the recruit, a young man named Miles, tracked him down at the depot late one night. Not with questions, but with gratitude, saying he'd lost his own father in Ramadi. That Ghost's call for evac was the reason his father's dog tags came home. That he'd spent his whole life wanting to be like the man who made that call, not knowing that man was sitting in the driver's seat all along. That the moment cracked something in the old warrior, and for the first time in decades, he spoke not about the mission, but about the silence, the loneliness, the price of surviving when others don't. And Miles just listened, not as a fanboy, not as a recruit, but as a son of war trying to understand its orphans. And from that night on, something changed. Because Ghost started showing up early, talking to the boys before runs, correcting their posture, teaching them how to pace their breath under stress, how to read terrain, how to shut up and listen when it counts. And they didn't call him sir or driver anymore, they called him coach. And though he never wore stripes again, his voice carried the weight of 10 generals. And when a recruit broke his leg during a drill, and the medics hadn't arrived, Ghost was the one who splintered it using his belt, lifted the boy like he was weightless, and walked him to Miles' back without breaking stride. And from then on, even the cockiest alpha types fell quiet when he spoke, because they knew, deep down, that they were in the presence of something rarer than rank, a man who'd faced death, and came back with silence as his medal, who had nothing left to prove, but still chose to serve, and word reached higher-ups, who wanted to reinstate him, decorate him, give him honors long overdue. But he refused, again, saying, "Let the boys earn theirs without living in my shadow." And so they let him be. But they renamed the SEAL training transport in his honor, Ghost Rider 1. And every new class heard the story how one recruit saw a faded tattoo and uncovered a legacy. How courage wears no uniform and sometimes drives a bus. And when Miles graduated top of his class, Ghost didn't attend the ceremony, but left a note tucked in his locker. "Make your own legend. I already have mine. G." And Miles stood there, helmet in hand, tears in his eyes, not because he'd met a hero, but because he understood now what real sacrifice looked like. Not loud, not shiny, not celebrated, but quiet, relentless, and unbreakable. And somewhere, far from the barracks and medals and noise, a grey bus rolled on at dawn, driven by a man who never stopped serving, whose silence screamed louder than any speech, whose tattoo told a story the world almost forgot, until someone finally looked close enough to see it.